Greetings, friends. Can y'all hear me? Oh, you're all muted. Maybe that's because I muted you all.
I can hear you.
Cool. Good to see y'all. How's everyone?
Pretty good.
Great. I'm glad that the Zoom link worked. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my desktop because I think that's the coolest. Yeah, welcome y'all. I have 231. Max, nice to not see you. Just kidding. David, how you doing?
Good.
Good. David, do I have an email from you in my inbox? I might be a little behind. But I don't think so. I don't know.
No, I haven't sent it yet.
All right, cool. Mirka, hello. Jacob Levels, hello. Christian Prieto, greetings. Michael, nice to see you.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Good to see y'all. Now, Jacob Levels, quick question. Is your roommate in this class? Yeah. Okay, but he's not on right now, right? Okay, cool. Cool. All right, cool. Y'all, welcome. I think we should get started. I like to keep this class to an hour or maybe an hour and a few minutes. But can you guys see my desktop at the moment? All right.
Yes,
cool.
sir.
Great. We're gonna pick up with Plato's line. Okay. Now let me before I get started. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything like that? Anything that anyone wants to say? I thought last class was really good. We're still just sort of getting started, picking up steam, ramping up. Does anyone have any questions, comments at the moment? What we're doing today is delving into brief excerpts of Plato and Aristotle, book 6 of Plato's Republic, and then book 12, section 7 of Aristotle's Metaphysics. And then in between those, we are gonna have a quick primer. And for some of you, it's review. For Jacob Levels, who's also in my intro class, it's redundant, but we're gonna have a quick primer on Heraclitus and Parmenides before we delve into Aristotle's Metaphysics. And the reason we're doing all of this is to just get some categories before we take the deep dive into the medieval thinkers proper, beginning with Augustine. Okay. Any questions, comments, thoughts, jokes, riddles? If not, Jacob, are you talking? Jacob, I didn't hear you. Maybe you're in the chat. Let me see if I can pull up the chat. Nope. Jacob, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but I cannot see you or find you. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I really got to figure out why that does that. I don't know why. It won't
So
let me.
sorry.
I was just going to say I'm really glad I am in your intro class right now because it's
Good.
meshed really well with this one. And
It's about to mesh a lot more. And for
looking forward to it.
good. And gosh, my student whose name I can't remember because I suck. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. He's not here, but he took my class before. For him, it would be review. Mason. For Mason, this will be review. Okay, y'all look with me on the little handout, the little lecture notebook. Roman numeral 2, Plato's Republic. We already talked about his writing style. That's going to come back up into play. I already alluded to it last class with this distinction between the monastic and the scholastic modes of writing in the medieval world. By the way, that distinction between monastic writing and scholastic writing, and you know, it shouldn't be taken too seriously, but that distinction comes from this excellent book by Jean Leclerc called The Love of Learning and the Desire for God. This is where I got that distinction between scholastic and monastic modes of medieval thought, okay? But so back to 2A, Plato's writing style. We already talked about that. It'll come back up. Look with me at B. Yeah, we already talked about that. This image, it's the middle of three images that Plato gives in the Republic for what you might call the essence of philosophy. Now look with me at C, the line itself. And I think that we went over this super briefly before we ran out of time last class. Am I right about that? I think I'm right about that. And I wish I had a nifty graphic for you. I don't. You can find one online. Just Google Plato's line, click on images. You'll find a bunch of stuff. But at the bottom, you've got what he calls akasia, or akasia, which you could translate as image, or maybe imagination, or maybe imageness. What does that mean? Well, let's hold that thought and maybe we'll come back to it. But the second phase, or the second moment of this progression, because it is a progression, is faith. The Greek word there is pistis. Now, faith in what? He doesn't say. I mean, if you've ever read Plato, or if you read the excerpt, which I hope you did, that I put on Canvas of this very passage, he doesn't say, because Plato doesn't define his terms. I mean, not really, or not usually. And is that bad? No, it's not bad. It's just the project that he's engaged in. He is writing in a more imaginative, literary, dramatic mode. It's not good or bad, in my opinion, but he doesn't define what he means by pistis. So it's hard to say. Now, I can say some things about how that has been interpreted over the years. I don't. So someone asked a question. It may have been either Jacob or David. I can't remember. Someone asked a question on the first or second day of class in the context of the Gracia article. We were talking about Fides and Augustine / Anselm's dictum, faith seeking understanding, Fides quorens intellectum. Someone asked a question, is that talking about faith in God? And I said yes, but that was true in the context of Augustine. What about this? Does Socrates / Plato have in view faith in God, the Christian faith? Definitely not the Christian faith. And I would say not even the faith in God. For now, I would encourage you guys to think of it kind of like confidence. Remember what I said about the chair last time? Who can remind me what I said about the chair last time? Anyone remember?
Something like whenever you have faith that you are in fact seeing a chair, not an image of a chair, and you have faith and confidence that whenever you sit down on the chair, you won't fall down.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. In a weird way, I think it's easier for us moderns to look back on this distinction between images on the one hand and confidence on the other. It makes a lot of sense to us because the modern age is kind of an age of skepticism. And so for skeptical thinkers, it makes sense to say, wow, I think that I see a cup here, but holy shit, it might just be an image, right? That makes sense for us. Weirdly, I don't think that that's in general how the ancients thought. I think that in general, they had what you might call an ontological assurance that the things of this world are real. And why is it that they are assured that the things of this world are real? Well, I think that Plato's giving an account of that with this movement from images to pistis. He's not calling into question pistis, any more than he's calling into question discursivity. He's saying this is how the mind works. This is how the mind works. This is how human beings grow in wisdom. This is what it means to be a philosopher. So you see what I'm trying to say right now, faith for him, pistis for him in this context, it's not up for grabs. He's not saying, well, certain people embrace faith and others might not. No, no, no. This is how all minds think. Pistis is a necessary condition. It's a stage along the way to intellect. And intellect is the final moment of this journey. In a way, you could say intellect is the destination, although in another way, you might say that the sun is the final destination. We will come to that. But yeah, first you have images or akasia, then you have faith or pistis. And faith is confidence. It's the ontological assurance that the things that are presented to our eyes and that we imagine in our minds as we interpret those images presented to our eyes, faith is the confidence that those things are real. Okay? Now, there's so much we could talk about here. All I'm trying to get you to do is to be familiar with this way of thinking. I'm introducing terms to you. I'm introducing a metaphor, an image to you that is very influential in the medieval world. So yeah, let's move on to step. By the way, let me say this. These first two moments of the line, these first two moments of the journey to mind or nous or intellect, these first two moments, I think can kind of sort of be collapsed into one moment. And I think that should make some sense. I mean, back to the chair example, I see a chair on the other side of my office right here. You can't see it, but it's right there on the other side of my computer. If I walk over to that chair and sit in it, that's can you see how that is image and faith working together? It's not like first I see the image and then I'm like, should I have confidence in that? No. When I perceive my cup, when I look at you guys, the images and the trust, they go together. Does that make sense? And I think that you can view that as one moment. They go together. Steps 1 and 2 come together to form a larger whole. And again, that whole, WHOLE, I think you could call ontological assuredness. It's taking it for granted that things you see are real. And it's also grasping things as a whole. I mean, whenever I pick up this stapler to use it, I'm interacting with the stapler as a whole, WHOLE. I'm not just paying attention to like one part of it, like this part. No. I'm using the whole thing. In other words, it's a unit. It's a particular. It's a thing. It's a thing. See, what it means to be a thing by definition is to be a whole. WHOLE. Now, there's parts that make up the whole, yeah, but it's still a thing. See, steps 1 and 2 together is the way we interact with things. It's steps number 1 and 2 together is the way that we grasp objects. Now, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
We see them, we see an image, but then it's as if we need to know that they're real. And those two things go together, and we need both of those in order to be able to grasp objects. When I say grasp, I don't literally mean grab like this, although that's not unrelated. When I say grasp, I mean comprehend. I mean register. Whenever I register this stapler, whenever I see it and perceive it or recognize it, that's a great word, recognize. The fancy word that philosophers use is apprehend. But these are all just synonyms for steps 1 and 2 going together. It's perceiving it and then taking it to be real. And both of those two things are necessary to recognize an object. I mean, when I go home tonight, I'm going to recognize my wife. That involves seeing the image, but also taking it for granted that she's real, right? Okay, that's steps 1 and 2. What I want to say is that they come together to form a larger moment. Now, what is step 3? Step 3, discursivity or discursive thought, or the Greek word is dianoia. By the way, look, I want you to look at the word dianoia. Are you looking at it? Now look at the word nous. And in step 4, nous. What does the word nous mean?
Mind.
Right, or intellect. It's intellectus in Latin, from which we get our English word intellect. By the way, remember this stuff, because when we read C.S. Lewis, he's going to talk a lot about the distinction between intellect on the one hand and reason or ratio, R-A, I'm going to put that here. Hang on. The Latin word for dianoia is usually ratio, like ratio, but it means reason. So C.S. Lewis is going to talk a lot in The Discarded Image about the distinction between intellect on the one hand and rationality, reason on the other. And it's a huge distinction, and it was important for the medievals, and it's also important for moderns and especially postmodern thinkers like Heidegger. But look with me at number 3. What is discursivity or discursive thought or dianoia? Look at the word dianoia. Now, can you see how that's kind of like the word nous? The noia is kind of like nous, and there's certain English cognates that come from this word nous and noia. Maybe you've heard the word noetic, Noetic. That comes from this root word. What does the prefix dia mean? Anyone want to guess?
God or deity.
Good guess, but no, it's a prefix. That would probably be a root word. Yeah, Jacob.
2.
Good guess. No, in this case, it means through, like diaphragm. The prefix di or dia can mean to, like in dialectic. Dialectic's a weird one because it could mean through or to, but here it means through, like a diaphragm. A diaphragm is the cavity through which air moves when you breathe, diaphragm. Here, dianoia, the prefix means through. What do you think noia means?
Mind.
Right. And y'all, discursivity or discursive thought is when the mind, or you could even say the attention. See, remember, steps 1 and 2 is when you recognize something. Does everyone see that? So, like, I recognize my cup. I recognize Jacob Dunn because I've seen him before. So I have a memory of him. I have a notion of who he is. I have a concept of Jacob Dunn in my mind. And so I see the image and I have that concept and I'm like, yeah, he's real. In a way, you could say that I'm recognizing Jacob Dunn there. I'm recognizing him and grasping him as a real person. Well, in moment 3, what you're doing is taking lots of those recognitions or apprehensions and stringing them together. And so the recognitions or apprehensions, apprehensions could be words on a page, like the love of learning and the desire for God, a bunch of words, right? But when you read that title, you focus your mind focuses on this word and then this word and then this word. You see how that's multiple elements, right? And each one of those words, you go through step 1 and step 2, basically, and then you grasp the word, but then you put those words together. And the dianoia is moving through a series of elements. Each word is an element. What are some other examples of elements? Well, what about a geometric proof? Step 1, step 2, step 3. Each premise or step has multiple elements, which could be words or symbols, right? And you string those together. But then step 2, premise 2, is another big element that you then recognize, grasp, and think through. Are you with me? That's dianoia, putting stuff together, taking different elements, seeing their relationships, and then grasping them as a whole, W-H-O-L-E. That's dianoia, or discursive thought. In Latin, I think that the best translation is ratio, okay? Now, y'all, side note, Augustine has a huge discussion of this in Confessions 11, which is one of the 3 books of the Confessions that we're going to read. So keep this in mind. Now, I need to say one more thing about discursivity or dianoia. I've said that it's putting stuff together, right? And that's true, whether you're talking about words within a sentence or premises or premises within an argument, or it could be parts of an image or an object. I mean, think about the face of a clock. Would you, and this is a bad example, imagine that it were an analog clock, right? There's lots of parts on the face of the analog clock. There's numbers, there's a circle, there's minute hand, hour hand. Are you with me? Well, discursive thought looks at all of those and puts them together to recognize or grasp or apprehend, oh, that's a clock. So discursivity, discursive thought, dianoia, is putting stuff together, but that's only half of it, because it's also taking stuff apart. It's also the making of distinctions, right? So any time you make a distinction, like let's say that you work for the FBI and your job is to recognize or identify counterfeit $100 bills. Your job is to learn to distinguish this real $100 bill from this counterfeit bill, right? Well, that involves distinctions. That's like discursive reading. Anytime you make a distinction, maybe you're reading a very difficult, or I'll give you an example. In Genesis, in the book of Genesis, there's 2 creation stories. Well, if you're able to see how they're different, that would be an example of dianoia, because you're taking 2 things and seeing the difference between them. Or maybe you're looking at something that at first appears to be a whole, W-H-O-L-E, and maybe it is a whole, W-H-O-L-E, but you still see distinctions within it. That is also dianoia. It involves different elements that are related to one another, putting them together, taking them apart. And look with me at footnote 3. Thomas Aquinas calls this componendo et dividendo. Composing things and dividing things. That's dianoia, or discursive thinking, or ratio, okay? And that's moment 3. Now, y'all, can you see how moment 3 is a bit more like an ongoing process? I mean, it seems kind of like moments 1 and 2 are punctiliar. They take place in an instant, and I think that that's true to a large extent. But with moment 3, it's kind of like it's a process. It takes time. And this is the very kind of thing that Augustine is going to talk about in book 11 of the Confessions. So moment 3 it has an important difference over and against the previous 2 moments that we've looked at. It seems to take time. The entire divided line, step 1, 2, 3, and 4, that whole thing is a movement or a process or a progression. But it seems kind of like moment 3 is itself a progression or a process or a movement. Are you with me? Good. I mean, you could say that moment one image doesn't take any time. Like, I mean, it does in some sense, but it happens in one fell swoop. Same with faith, number two. But discursivity does not happen in one fell swoop. By definition, it's a process. First this element, and then you move to this element, and then you move to this element, and then you put them apart or take them, put them together or take them apart, okay? That's moment three, dianoia. Now, what's number four? Intellect or mind or nous. Y'all, here's what that is. That is grasping the whole, W-H-O-L-E. Now, yeah, that's grasping the whole. So for example, I'll just tell you the example that Augustine gives in the Psalm. I mean, in book 11 of the Confessions, he talks about reading a Psalm, like the Psalms in the Bible. And for the purposes of this discussion, I want us to imagine that he's not talking about a Psalm. Imagine that he's talking about a story. Let's just say he's talking about a story from the Bible. Let's just say he's talking, anyone have a favorite story of the Bible?
The prodigal son.
Good. I like it. I like it. Could we choose one from the Old Testament? But by the way, I mean, I love that. Could we choose one from the Old Testament?
Yeah. I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but maybe the one where
I'm not looking
like,
for anything.
okay. Yeah, I'm thinking the one like where the prophet, like summons these bears to eat like, I guess, a group of men.
Wow. Okay. By the way, I don't remember that one. I feel really
okay.
stupid right now.
I'm not making up, I promise.
Oh, I believe you. Do you know what book of the Bible that's in?
I don't know.
Does anyone know?
I've heard of the story. I just can't remember where it's at.
All right. Well, let's go with that one. Or we could go with maybe, I don't know.
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark. Let's do Noah's Ark. Good. That's a good one. So imagine that you're reading the story of Noah's Ark for the very first time. Or imagine that you have a nephew or a niece and they're like 4 years old, 5 years old, and you're reading that story with them, and it's the first time they've ever read it, okay? Would you agree with me that in reading that story, they are engaging in moment three, dianoia? Lots of words, lots of sentences, and in order to like get the whole story, you got to put them all together, right? Moment four is when you grasp the whole thing. That's what nous is. Nous is grasping the whole. It's the simplicity on the far side of complexity. It's when you say, oh, I get it. It's kind of like an epiphany or an aha moment. That's intellect or nous or mind. It's the result of the hard work and the complexity of discursivity. It's the simplicity on the far side of complexity. It's the ultimate moment of recognition. All right. Now, y'all, these are all huge, huge themes in Christian thought and in medieval thought. I cannot resist the temptation to say this real quick. When it comes to moment four, nous, one of the things that Christians like St. Augustine and others, St. Bonaventure for sure, one of the things that they have a tendency to associate with intellect nous, the top segment on Plato's line, is the beatific vision. So if you're taking notes, and I hope you are, write down that phrase, beatific vision. Have y'all ever heard that phrase, beatific vision? The beatific vision is the way that many, many medievals, like St. Bonaventure and Thomas Aquinas, imagine how can I put it? It's the way that they imagine going to heaven when you die. It's the way that they imagine seeing God. There's that verse where St. Paul says, right now we see through a glass darkly, but one day we will see God face to face, right? That's the beatific vision. And it, by the way, I have to say this. If you want to know more about the beatific vision, and this would be an awesome paper topic, a great thing to do would be to read the last 100 lines of Dante's Paradiso, which is the third part of his comedy, Commedia, the Divine Comedy, Dante. Now, Dante's not one of our assigned readings. He's not one of our big authors in this class, although C.S. Lewis is going to talk about him in the Discarded Image. But like Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure both talk about the beatific vision. When we get to book 7 of the Confessions, there's a little bit similar things in there, but you could reference Dante's portrayal of the beatific vision in the last 100 lines of the Paradiso. But that's the beatific vision. I just wanted to throw that out there and sort of say, I'm planting a seed that Christians have this tendency, and I don't think it's wrong, to associate the beatific vision, which is kind of like the end game of the Christian life. If you've ever read C.S. Lewis's essay, The Weight of Glory, which is an amazing essay, there's a place in there where he talks about the end of the Christian life where we hear God say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Okay. That's kind of like the beatific vision. It's the end game of the Christian life. It's where our entire life is headed. So you could imagine the Christian life as moment 3, discursivity. You could imagine that the entire Christian life, you can imagine it like reading the Bible or learning wisdom. Well, what is the end game of all of that? Where is that leading? What is the climax or the purpose or the telos? Do you know that word telos, T-E-L-O-S? It means goal or purpose. What is the telos of the entire Christian life? Well, it's the beatific vision. It's seeing God. It's seeing God and being seen by God, which is everything. Okay. So y'all, I'm done. I'm done talking about Plato's line. I actually spent more time on that than I intended. Images, faith, discursivity, intellect, acacia, pistis, dianoia, ratio. I want to say one more thing, then we're going to go to this bullet point underneath. Remember how I said that moments 1 and 2 come together to form a larger whole? So moments 1 and 2 are both needed to recognize something in the sense of taking it to be real. When I go home tonight, I'm going to open the door and it's possible that I will look up and I will see my wife. And I will also have confidence that it's really her. And in that way, I will grasp her and recognize her. I will apprehend her. Are you with me? But then, so that you could view that moments 1 and 2 together as, you could call it A. And remember, A, that is to say moments 1 and 2 together, A is a larger whole that's made up of 1 and 2, images and confidence. But then there's discursivity, and discursivity is not just apprehending one element that is a whole, but many, many elements. Putting them together, taking them apart, stuff like that. But here's what I want to say to you. If you think about number 4, intellect nous, or grasping the whole, can you see how that's kind of like that first moment? See, you could call the first moment 1 and 2, you could call that A. You could call it recognition. B would be discursivity. But then with nous, moment number 4, you could say that that is A prime. So you have A, B, A prime. And what that is, y'all, it's a movement. It's a chiasm. It's a movement away and then back again, away and then back again. Kind of like at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, Hobbits, talks about there and back again. This is called a chiasm. It's connected to so many things. It's connected to Gadamer's hermeneutical circle, this is really Gadamer's hermeneutical circle. I just want to plant that seed. You can view nous as a return to the beginning. Okay? Because remember, the whole thing's a process. So when you get to the end, unless it's the beatific vision, you start over again. Okay? Now, I'm going to read this bullet point and then I'm going to be quiet and let y'all ask questions. Note that the sun, in the image that Plato gives us in Book 6 of the Republic, the sun is completely beyond the line. It's above the line. It's above nous. It's transcendent to the line, implying perhaps that the entire trajectory of the line, that the entire direction of its movement is what? Toward the sun. It may be that Plato intends the sun to be an image for the good. Notice that good is capitalized right there. It may be that Plato intends the sun to be an image for the good or for the forms, which in some way perhaps can be thought of as culminating in the good. Here it is easy to interpret the good as, well, as God. And then footnote 4. To my mind, this is the ultimate expression of Plato's theos. Now, what is theos?
God.
Right. Who can remind me how to say God in Latin? Because the thinkers that we're looking at in this class, they don't write in Greek, they write in Latin. How do you say God in Latin? Deus, right, D-E-U-S. To my mind, footnote 4, this is the ultimate expression of Plato's God, his theos. What do I mean by this? I mean the sun that is transcendent to the line. This is the ultimate expression of Plato's theos. That is his equivalent version of Aristotle's unmoved mover. Note that both Plato and Aristotle are both demythological thinkers. Neither take Zeus or the pantheon of Greek deities to be ultimate in the sense of truth, philosophical truth. I'm suggesting, in other words, that with Plato's good here in Republic 6 and with Aristotle's unmoved mover, we come closest among all pagan thinkers. By the way, did we do this last time?
Mm-hmm.
Did I read footnote 4 last time?
I have it highlighted from last time.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm slightly embarrassed. We come closest to the I am what I am, which is closely related to the tetragrammaton, Yahweh, which Jews don't like anyone to pronounce, Exodus 3. And I could talk a lot more about that. We don't actually know how it's pronounced. It's the unspeakable name of God, the tetragrammaton, Exodus 3. Yeah, so the unmoved mover and Plato's good come close to evoking, suggesting the same thing as what most Christian interpreters in the medieval age understood by the burning bush story, when this voice comes out and says, basically, I am what I am. Right? Wow, I'm sad that I did all that last time, but I think I did it really, really fast.
You did. It was like
Y'all-
right there at the end.
Y'all have any questions, comments? This is Plato's line. It's the first of 2 forays into the ancient world that we're taking before we dive headlong into Augustine. Okay. Let me just ask you this. Am I making sense? I mean, in all likelihood, a lot of this is strange. And I don't know, new, maybe. So, it's okay if it doesn't seem easy or if it seems weird, but I hope I'm making sense. All right.
Because like when I first read Plato, I was like, I don't understand what he's talking about at all.
Yeah. Did you
And
go
then-
back and reread it?
Yes.
Awesome.
I read it twice, and then I was talking to my brother about it, and he's like, yeah, I don't know either. And
Did you
then when
read it after we discussed it?
Yes, and that made more sense. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
it
Dude,
makes more
philosophy
sense.
is insanely difficult. It is insanely difficult. I mean, I couldn't read. You can't read text like that by yourself and understand them unless you're some sort of freakish genius. You have to have people explaining them to you. Yeah. I mean, I remember the first time I read Augustine's Confessions as a sophomore in college. It just seemed, I don't know, boring. I don't know. I did not get it at all. Yeah. Any other comments, questions?
I was sort of thinking about from last discussion the generalizations, and there's like
Are you talking about universal terms?
yes.
Good.
So there's things, or there's something that's living, and then maybe a thing, which incorporates a lot of a wide spectrum of reality, and then there's
Yeah,
something.
and can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Aristotle's terminology, which I think is super helpful to talk about thing, is concrete particular.
Concrete particular.
Concrete particular. Keep going.
Okay. So concrete as in physical. Necessarily.
I prefer the word material.
To necessarily material. So like a sentiment or like or an idea wouldn't fit that criteria, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. So I guess okay, and sometimes it's difficult, and I don't want to devolve into semantics, but sometimes it's just difficult. Anyway, I'm having trouble conceiving of, and let's see here, of existence. Like there's existence, something has a being, but it is also not a thing. That to me is confusing. Yeah.
What are you thinking of right now? Give me an example of give me an example of what you're thinking of.
Well, you were talking about, let's see here, and I actually said something earlier that you said that, let's see here, a thing is something that is comprised of parts. So that would be different than something. Well, it says like, I don't even know what your words to use. So, for lack of a better term, something that is simple. So Plato's God is, I mean, not Plato's God, Aristotle's God is simple, as in not comprised of parts. Therefore, it's not a thing. I'm trying to make sense of this,
Good.
but it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around.
Yeah.
Something that has being and then but is not a thing. So it has existence. It is simple. It doesn't have to have parts, but it is also not a thing. But then perhaps this is contentious. I think
it's certainly not a concrete particular.
You know what? Particular, yeah.
Michael, listen, this is awesome. You're totally on the right track. I want to say one thing, but then I want to encourage you to hold your thought and bring it back up when we get through Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because the one thing I want to say to you is just this notion of divine simplicity, which I'm saying Parmenides invented it. We're going to come to that in a moment. Wait, did we already do that? No. When did I talk about simplicity?
I'm not sure if we did or not. I remember reading it though.
Oh, good. Maybe you read ahead. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I don't know.
Listen, when it comes to divine simplicity, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, because we're about to come to Parmenides, it's not just like no parts. Like, I don't know. Imagine a dot. A dot. I have a Sharpie. Here's my Sharpie. I'm going to make a dot. You see the dot? Everyone see that? Now, it might be easy to say, oh, that doesn't have parts, therefore it's simple. No, no, no. That's not really what's going on. Simplicity is a string of negations. It's beyond abstract. It's a string of negations. It's like radical negation. That's what simplicity is. It's not just no parts.
I don't know what you mean by radical. Could you explain what radical negation means?
Do you know what negation means?
Negate, like to.
It's the word no.
Yeah.
Listen, I think you need to hold your thought,
Okay.
which are awesome. We're about to get to Parmenides, and this stuff's going to come back up. Is that cool?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's go to Roman numeral 3, because y'all, before we go to Aristotle, now we're talking about Plato and Aristotle as kind of like a prerequisite to the medievals, but there's also a little prerequisite to Aristotle, and it is Heraclitus and Parmenides, okay? And for some of you, this is review. For Jacob, it's redundant because he's also learning this in the other class. I'm going to try to go through it super quickly. But in order to understand why Aristotle matters, and in particular for the medievals, I think it's helpful to get the point about Heraclitus and Parmenides. So you've got these two pre-Socratic thinkers, Heraclitus and Parmenides, okay? And what and they both make a big maxim, a big dictum, a big declaration. This is like a banner that you could paste on their foreheads. This is all you need to know about Heraclitus, and that is this. He says everything is flux. What is the world? What is real? What is reality? Flux. He says, therefore, you cannot step in the same river twice. Now, I don't want to talk about that sentence. We don't have time. Just know that Heraclitus says that everything is flux. And y'all, just super briefly, that's a nihilistic worldview. It reminds me of Nietzsche. I'm not saying it's bad. I actually don't think it's bad. But he says everything is flux all the time. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is stable. Everything is changing. Everything is flowing in and out of everything else. Now, what do y'all think about that? Let me ask you this. Are you comfortable? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Like, are you really confused right now? Or look, the way I put it in my undergrad class is, if you've ever seen a time lapse of sandcastles on the beach, like imagine, you know what a time lapse video is? Like, let's say I'm videotaping a beach, it's spring break, there's little kids running around, teenagers, and they build sandcastles, and then the waves come in and the waves go out and the waves come in and the waves go out and the waves come in, and they destroy those sandcastles, right? Then someone else walks up and they build some other sandcastles, and then the waves come in and they knock those down and the waves go out, right? Okay, so you've recorded this video. It's a 10-hour video, but then you compress it into 60 seconds or 5 minutes, right? And what do you see? What do you see happen to those sandcastles?
They get destroyed.
They get destroyed, right? And they get destroyed quickly. Like, they pop up and then they go down. And then let's say that someone builds a really big sandcastle. Let's say that it's 8 feet tall. You can see them building it, and it gets bigger and bigger, and you see it, and then the waves come and it gets destroyed, right? Now, let me ask you a question. If you're watching that time lapse video, do those sandcastles look stable? Yes or no?
No.
No. By the way, a synonym for stable would be permanent. Do the sandcastles seem permanent in the time-lapse video? No.
No.
Okay, but what about if you're at spring break and you're I don't know, you're eating a sandwich and you look up and you see a sandcastle over there and it's huge. Does it seem stable?
At that point, yes.
At that point, yes. And that's what we're talking about. So, okay, wait, things seem stable, but then when you look at it through the time lapse, they seem transient. Is that right?
Mhm.
I think that's right. Now, here's the question. Is this cup any different than the sandcastle? I mean, look at the cup. It seems stable. It seems permanent. I mean, I've had it for a few years, but will this cup be around in a millennium?
No.
I don't think so. Maybe the cup is transient. Heraclitus says that's how all reality is. All reality is a matter of flux. Everything's changing all the time. Will the cup be around in a century? No. Will the business building at UT Tyler be around in 500 years? No. Will Mount Everest be around in a million years? No. That's flux. Okay? That is what Heraclitus is saying. He's saying, look with me at 3. He's saying that the world is a blooming, buzzing confusion. That's William James' term. William James, an American modern philosopher. It's kind of a nihilistic worldview, but it's also not foreign to Christianity, because think about Genesis 1:2, number 1 under A. What does Genesis 1:2 say? And the world and the earth was formless and void, and darkness hovered over the surface of the deep. Have you ever heard that? What is that? What's going on there? Well, that is the world, the world, creation, reality, before day one of creation, before God begins to create light and to make distinctions like componendo et dividendo. God makes distinctions between light and dark, land and sea, the water above and the water below. Those are distinctions. That's dividendo. Are you with me? But before all of that, the earth was formless and void. That's a blooming, buzzing confusion. What one philosopher, Peter Adamson, he says that it's kind of like a salad dressing of vinaigrette dressing, a bottle of vinaigrette dressing. Imagine that this is a bottle of vinaigrette dressing. What happens with vinaigrette dressing? The oil settles to the bottom and the water settles to the top. So you got to shake it up, right? But then after you shake it up, everything's flowing in and out of each other. It's like a swirling vortex. That's what Heraclitus says the whole world is like. It's like a big whirlpool or a vortex or an abyss. In my undergrads, look with me at number 4. I compare it to the static that I saw on television sets when I was a little boy, before the age of cable and internet. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those black and white flickers.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any shapes in that? Can you say, oh, there's a triangle. Oh, there's someone's face. No, you can't even point to, you cannot recognize anything. Talk about the first 2 moments of Plato's line, images and then confidence. No way, there are no images. Everything's constantly in flux. This is Heraclitus's worldview, okay? Now, look with me at number 2. This is very related to what Aristotle calls prime matter. Michael, do you remember how a minute ago I said, let me give you a nifty word for thing, a nifty phrase for thing. What did I say?
Concrete,
Particular.
particular, yeah.
Good. Now, here's how Aristotle thinks of a concrete particular, and we'll come back to this in a minute. A concrete particular is and you need to write this phrase down. It's a composite unity of form and matter. Form and matter. That's what a thing / concrete particular is. It's a composite unity of form and matter. Okay? Now, did y'all hear that? Form and matter. So this cup is a composite unity of form and matter. What is the form? Clay. What is the matter? It's the shape of a cup. Sorry, I got that backwards. What is the matter? pottery or clay. What is the form? The shape of a cup. Okay. We could talk about the cup. We could talk about the marker. We could talk about the magnolia tree outside. We could talk about Jacob Levels, his body. Take anything in the world. Aristotle says that it's a composite unity of form and matter. Are you with me? Well, go back to Genesis 1:2. The earth was formless and void. What Augustine thinks that is talking about is pure matter, utterly devoid of form, no form.
Telos.
Huh?
No telos or
No
purpose.
telos. Is that what you're
Telos.
saying?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. No form, no shape, no intelligibility. It's just a blob or a big mess. Now, Aristotle calls this prime matter. Look with me at footnote 6. In connection here, we can also think almost by extension to Plato's realm of becoming. See, here's what I'm trying to say. Look you see number A, Heraclitus, and number B, Parmenides. Heraclitus is kind of like the matter part. Parmenides is kind of like the form part. And here's what I'm trying to say to you. Both Plato and Aristotle take Heraclitus and Parmenides and put them into dialectic. Both Plato and Aristotle, they give Heraclitus a high five and they give Parmenides a high five, and they look at them and they say, you're half right. You need each other. Let's take both and put them into dialectic and see if we can come up with something even better. It's like a good marriage. It's yin and yang. Are you with me? So, but Heraclitus is like the matter part of Aristotle's concrete particular of matter and form. Parmenides is like the form part. Okay. Now, y'all, I'm going to go through Parmenides real quick. I'm going to try to do it in 5 minutes. I probably can't. And then next class, we're going to start with Aristotle. Okay. Now, Michael, this is very much the sort of stuff that you were asking about. Here's what Parmenides says. Now, what did Heraclitus say? All is what? Flux, right? Parmenides says something opposite. All is being. And the entire question is what the hell does he mean by being? Okay. Now, Jacob Dunn, think about flux, Parmenides.
Mm-hmm.
When we say that all is flux, is that static? Sorry, is that stable or transient?
Transient.
Correct. Parmenides says, fuck transience. That's not real. That's a lie. That's wrong. The truth is that all is being. And for him, being is stable. Stable. Look with me at number 1. Parmenides says, don't even think about non-being. Don't even think about non-being. Now, yeah, that might not be as helpful in this context as it is in my undergrad class. Let me just say that what Parmenides is saying is all is being. The question is, what is being? And here's the deal. Parmenides does not define being. You remember how in a couple of classes ago, there was this discussion that we had about the definition of being. And remember what I said? I said, I'm not sure that there is a definition for being. Well, this is relevant here. Parmenides doesn't say what being is. He only says what being is not. Okay? And here's some things that being is not. Change. Look with me at A, change. Change for Parmenides, and I don't know if I have time to explain this to you, if I could do it next class. For Parmenides, change involves non-being. Why? Think about a tadpole changing into a frog. When it's a frog, is it a tadpole? Yes or no?
No.
Right. That's non-being for Parmenides. Parmenides says, whack a non-being. You've heard of whack-a-mole? Parmenides says, whack a non-being. He says, don't even think about non-being. All is being, and you must not even entertain the possibility of non-being. Don't even think about it. Well, what is non-being? Here's one example: change. Change involves non-being, because when the tadpole is a tadpole, it's not a frog. And when it's a frog, it's not a tadpole. That's non-being for Parmenides. So what is non-being? A, change. 2, multiplicity or diversity. How does that involve non-being? Here's how. The pen is not the Sharpie. Did you hear that? Not. That's non-being. Parmenides says whack a non-being. Don't even talk about it. The moment you start thinking about non-being, you've forgotten that all is what?
Being.
Being. Exactly. So what is non-being? A, change. B, multiplicity / diversity. That just means 2 things. Adam and Eve, up and down, coffee and beer. Any 2 things. That involves non-being. That's diversity or multiplicity, okay?
Did he apply that to race?
Anything. Yes. What else is non-being? Composition. That is being composed of parts and wholes. Even spatial extension is a form of non-being. So Parmenides is the opposite of Heraclitus. Heraclitus says all is flux. It's a radically nihilistic worldview that says that everything is transient and there's no stability. That's Heraclitus. Parmenides comes along and says, screw that. Here's the real story. All is being. What does he mean by being? Well, he doesn't tell us what it is. He only tells us what it isn't. And here's what it isn't: non-being, aka non-being in the form of change, non-being in the form of multiplicity or diversity, non-being in the form of composition, aka parts and wholes, non-being in the form of spatial extension. Now, Michael, if you take, do you see how when Parmenides says that being is not change, do you see how that's a negation?
Being is not change.
Do you see how that's a negation?
Negate as if being is not. Yeah. So it change would negate being and vice versa. Yeah.
That's right. All negation means is a negative statement. I am not Chinese. That's a negation. So being is not X is a negation. Are you with me?
Yes.
You are awesome. I know that this stuff is hard. Being is not X. Being is not change. Being is not multiple or diverse. Being is not composite. Being is not spatially extended. Michael, those are all negations. Do you see that?
All those, yes, all of these parts or distinctions, or diversity and composition. Yeah.
All of these statements are negations. They're all negative statements. Yeah. Now, Michael, here's my point. If you take them all together, that is simplicity. That is the doctrine of simplicity. Look with me at number 3. We're almost done. By the way, I just did number 4. Look with me at number 3. In other words, being is not changing, not diverse, not composite, not spatially extended. Look with me at number 4. If you string together all of these negations, you get the notion of simplicity, a term Aristotle uses in Metaphysics 12:7 that we're going to read next time to describe not being, but God. Whoa. Not being, but God. Aristotle's like, Parmenides, you're brilliant. all that stuff you said about being, how it doesn't change, it's not multiple, it's not spatially extended. That's amazing, Parmenides. But there's only one thing. You're not talking about being, you're talking about God. Okay? If you string together all these negations, you get the notion of simplicity. It's as if Aristotle looks at Parmenides and says, you thought you were describing being, actually you're describing God. See, what's going on here is that Aristotle is giving a massive high five to Parmenides. Parmenides, who's the first metaphysician ever, comes along and he gives an account of being, which is negative. He doesn't say what being is, he just says what being isn't. Aristotle comes along and says, that's fucking awesome, but that's how I'm going to talk about God. That's what Aristotle does, okay? And y'all, I'm gonna stop right there. We have a few minutes for questions if anyone has any. What I want you to know is that I'm going to show you next class that this is what Aristotle's doing in Metaphysics 12:7. Read it again. Read it again before Monday, and look for this stuff. Look for the word simplicity in there. Okay, and that's what we're going to do on Monday. Now, what questions or comments do you have? Michael, have I helped you with your question about simplicity?
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean by the stringing of negations. Yeah.
And yeah, that's right. It doesn't mean like a dot or something. It's hyper abstract. It's negation on steroids. Thomas Aquinas literally says in the Summa Theologiae, he says, we cannot say what God is. We can only say what God is not. That's Thomas Aquinas. He's piggybacking on Aristotle, who piggybacks on Parmenides. It's the doctrine of divine simplicity. It's question 3 in the Summa. We're actually only reading question 2. Okay? Yes, Jacob.
If all is being, what does Parmenides consider things? Like, what are we just all illusions or what?
Yes, we are all illusions, which seems crazy, but also Parmenides seems crazy. I mean, Heraclitus seems crazy too. Lots of Buddhists have said that what we think that we perceive is an illusion. I don't think it's that crazy. Now, I think it's wrong. I'm with Aristotle. Aristotle takes both thinkers, Heraclitus and Parmenides, and puts them together. We're going to see that. Plato does the same thing. Plato's 2 realms of becoming and being, that's Heraclitus and Parmenides. The realm of becoming, growth and decay, that's Fuchsius or nature. That's a lot like Heraclitus. But Plato's notion of being, by which he probably means the forms, that's Parmenides' being. So Plato and Aristotle both take Heraclitus and Parmenides and put them together. They're each a half truth for Plato and Aristotle.
I actually had a question about that point.
Yeah, David.
So I was actually talking to Jacob about this the other night, and it might just be like a cheap trick, but if we're like illusions like certainly aren't real, which means that, you know, like the person who's like propounding this argument, they're technically like no one. So
Okay,
like,
awesome.
should someone feel compelled to respond to an argument that no one made?
I would say 2 things. I'm gonna throw you under the bus, and then I'm gonna give you a high five.
I'm ready.
Here's me throwing you under the bus. You're assuming that Parmenides, the author of this material, are you with me so far?
Yeah.
You're thinking of Parmenides as a body and a soul, right? Cut to the chase. Maybe Parmenides' body is not real. Maybe it's an illusion, just like this cup is, and that leaves his soul, right?
Right.
Or his mind. Well, maybe his mind is simple. Maybe his mind is God. Maybe his mind is somehow connected to God. And if that were the case, that would that would be consistent with his claim, I think. Now, let me give you a high five now. That was me throwing you under the bus. Now let me give you a high five. I don't mean throwing you under the bus. I need to critique something that you said and then affirm something you said, okay? Here's my affirmation. You're right. I mean, how do we even know what Parmenides said? We read it in a book somewhere, right? Right, David?
Right. Yeah.
And now maybe it was a manuscript that we only have fragments of that, existed 2,500 years ago, but he still wrote something down. And we know that partly because he wrote in hexameter verse. So he wrote something down, and guess what? The words that he wrote down are concrete particulars. By the way, this is kind of a Christian postmodern move I'm making. But the words on the page are physical objects. They are concrete particulars. They have form and matter.
That's not what's relevant behind them. In other words, the symbolic representation or the idea represented behind them is what renders them meaningful, not the physical ink on the page.
Okay, very good. But the physical ink on the page is still necessary, right?
Not if it's what do you think about an oral tradition?
Hang on. Well, but that doesn't apply here because Parmenides wrote stuff down. Let's come back to that later.
Okay.
Y'all, philosophy is brutal. It's like torture. Like it requires a lot of discipline to sort of stay on. It's a balance between staying on track and then going off on really interesting side notes. So Michael, you're awesome for asking that. But in the case of Parmenides, because I'm responding to David, he did write stuff down, and the words that he wrote down are concrete particulars. He has to say that they're illusory. He doesn't have to say that his mind is illusory, David. That's what I was saying before. His body, yes, but not his mind. Okay? It could be that his mind is somehow simple, and it could be that his mind is God, aka simple being. But none of that's true for the words on the page. The words on the page, do they have parts and wholes? Yes. Are they spatially extended? Yes. In other words, they're non-being. He says whack a non-being. And so, yes, there is something like an inconsistency or an incoherence there. You're right. And that incoherence characterizes so much of philosophy. I mean, in my intro class, we're going to read Nietzsche, and Nietzsche basically says truth doesn't exist, and yet he just uttered a statement that he intends to be true. That's the same kind of thing. So that's a really good insight, and yeah, you'll see that over and over again. Okay, y'all, have a good weekend. Have all of y'all emailed me with your thinker and scheduling constraints? Raise your hand if you've not done that.
Okay, so quick question. I couldn't find your email and I messaged you on Canvas. Is that okay?
I prefer emails.
Okay.
Forgive me if I haven't responded to your message on Canvas.
Okay, sorry, then what can I find your email? I can just email you right now.
It's on the syllabus.
Okay, I couldn't
It's
find it,
very
but I'll
top.
look again. Thank you.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, Christian. Michael, yeah, send me an email.
Okay.
And I'm going to say something because one person has already told me that they want to do Bonaventure. Do you remember what I said about Bonaventure on the first day of class? I said, if you're willing to do Bonaventure, I'll give you 5 extra credits, 5 extra credit points. That's a very cheap, sleazy trick of mine, but I'm sticking with it. It's harder. It's harder. Okay. Peace out. Hope y'all are well. Have a great weekend
You too.
Thank you.
and hang in there. It'll be worth it. Bye.
Bye.